What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to the show, gang. Sorry to keep you waiting a couple extra minutes there. Just wanted to rerun some Sims. Made a couple quick changes for Orlando. I wanted to take Jonathan Isaac down a little bit. He's crazy popular in some sites. He's less popular in others. A lot of moving pieces right now. So I'm just rerunning stuff in the background. Let me make sure these are actually running. Yeah, the DraftKings one didn't kick off. FanDuel's going. So bear with me real quick while we get these Sims done, and then we'll populate the data into the spreadsheet, and we'll be good to go there. How you guys doing out there? Everybody having a good Friday so far? Got some really interesting contests tonight. FanDuel's got a $5 40K to first place, and DraftKings looks like they're running an $8 100K to first. Pretty beefy contests there. And just get this set up. Running these Sims as usual on our pals over at acemine.io. Got to check those guys out if you haven't already. A lot of moving parts. Let's see if this kicks off for me. I really hope there's nothing screwed up in here. I'm trying to do this as quick as I possibly can in the background, and I think I missed something in the upload for DK. FanDuel's done. Just need to grab the results. Yeah, this DK one's not loading. Bear with me. Anybody else have a good night out there last night? I put one in 7th place in the FanDuel contest. Just in the $3. I only threw in 7 entries. We were tied. I was tied in 7th in the end. Solid little night. We were tied in 4th with like 20 seconds left in that late game. And Norm Powell bricked a 3. Rebound came out toward the free throw line. Kevin Durant jumped up, tipped it backward toward the wrong team. Norm Powell caught it again, jacked up another 3 and made that one. And 2 lineups jumped up ahead of me and whoever I was tied with. So that was fun. All right, let me get this squared away. I'll show that lineup in half a second. It's a nice little sweat, though. Always fun. And, honestly, to get one on the board for a decent cash in the first, 10 days of the season? Pretty happy about that. All right, let me see what's screwed up in this upload. That's what it is. Ronnie Holland killing me, man. All right. I think that was the only thing. Yep. For some reason, the naming, again, didn't go through. And he was in there with an asterisk, and I think that was killing the upload. This should work now. As powerful as all these tools at every different site are, every one of them is going to get a little bit finicky if you upload something like that into it. That's these got lineups built. That was the other thing that slowed me down. I went and I built the lineups again, like I did yesterday. So we've got some optimized lineups to work with in these Sims. All right, FanDuel 1 ran. Let me grab that. Clicked on the wrong spot, of course. I'm going to lose until I win the Millie says I did all right. Andy, NFL's probably going to be tomorrow. I'm just so far behind the curve as far as getting the article done, the big groups article done. So plan is going to be to do an afternoon show tomorrow, probably somewhere. I always say like noon to 2, but it ends up being more like 2 to 3. So look somewhere in that window. But yeah, definitely it's going to be tomorrow. Projections are up on the site. Rankings are up on the site. I just haven't really gotten the chance to dig into, putting all my notes together with all the different individual targets each week and all of that stuff that I like to get into. So it'll take a sec. But hopefully you're around tomorrow to join us. If not, it'll be sitting here for you to consume overnight tomorrow or Sunday morning. I'm going to try and keep it a little bit lighter than some of the other shows. Oh, I got to move the projections over too. Lighter just in terms of, maybe make it a little bit more brisk time because you know we can spend hours on that. But the optimizer article, if you guys haven't read it in weeks past, the groups, game notes, it's essentially a written version of the show, sometimes deeper. Sometimes I uncover new things as I'm going through for the article, and I always update it going into Sunday. So even after the show, anything that changes is going into that article. So always make sure that you're at least perusing those game notes, looking at the groups and the constructions and everything. All right. At least we got projections on here. DraftKings still running. Let me make sure it's actually running. It is. Fantastic. All right. Now we're in business. So what? So we'll just hang out and chat for a minute, but I'll go through some of the game environments and stuff as we wait for the DK sim to finish off. And then we should be good to go. But, yeah, NFL will be tomorrow. The groups article will be done tonight into tomorrow. At least the shell of it, like the groups, the different plays, will all be up there tonight. And then the game notes are a work in progress because they take literally like 12 hours to do. So love to start doing that earlier in the week, but there's just not enough hours in the day. My sister was messaging me earlier today, like, hey, you should jump on, you should create a better social media presence for your business and everything. I was like, dude, literally not enough time to do what I have right now, let alone adding that. But I'm trying to cover everything. Hockey projections up on the site. No more baseball, unfortunately, but if you're joining us, if you're new, rotoscouts.com, check it out. Under $1 a day for access to every single sport. We're currently covering NFL in great detail for all the main slates and all the showdown slates. We're covering basketball for all the main slates. That's what we're here to talk about right now. And we're covering hockey. We've got hockey projections live on the site. 5-game hockey slate tonight. Mamba's here. Mamba's inviting everybody to double down on his greatness. Love it. Cujo's here. Cujo is first one in the door as usual. Happy Friday to you too, pal. Happy Friday, Andy. Stephen Leibowitz. Hoop de jour. Love it. Kenneth Woodhouse. Ducking. Millie. Anthony Taylor. Andy. Good to see everybody here. Waiting on the DK sim. Should just be another minute or two. So let's talk a little bit of game environments. We can always start there. Magic, a banged-up Magic team going against a pretty stout defensive Cavs team. 7.5 points favored at home for Cleveland. 218-point total. Not the most appealing game environment, but what we're going to have is some value pieces. As I mentioned at the very top, the reason I'm rerunning some of these sims late is because I adjusted Jonathan Isaac a little bit. I had him at 22. I pulled him down to 20. I know other sites are going higher. I know other sites are going lower. I'm trying to just find a healthy middle where we get some, but we don't get overwhelmed. I can see it because he's a really good point per minute player. I just think he was kind of highly owned in at least some places, but some of the source I'm using, another reason I reran it is because they also brought him down for ownership over at RG. So I'm kind of interested in that. But subsequently, they spiked the ownership on a couple other players that I'm not so sure about. But we'll see what that all looks like. But definitely, some shaky pieces on the Orlando side. The usual bodies for Cleveland. Not the most appealing game environment at 218. Same thing with the Knicks and the Pistons. Definitely some upside with the Knicks. Karl Anthony Towns is currently questionable, and that is going to just create all kinds of situations if he doesn't play. I have a feeling he's going to go, but we'll see what happens. Jericho Sims and Akporti become the go-to value pieces of the day in that case. But right now, just looks like it is who they are who they are situation for the Knicks. Pistons on the other side, the top-end pieces like Cade you can always get to, but mediocre looking today. We'll see how he simmed out, of course. Obviously, I haven't looked through these sim results yet because they are just running. Boston and Charlotte looks like a wipeout, 10.5 point favorites for Boston. No Al Horford, though, should create a little bit of downboard value. We'll see how those guys simmed out. Charlotte Hornets, 232.5 point total. There's obvious top-end pieces with the Hornets. It's a playable game for sure. It's the highest, tied for the second highest total with a couple other games on the board at 232.5. Chicago and the Nets, a close spread, 2-point game. Nets got Watford back today. That should take away some of those value plays. I think it's just an are who they are situation for the Nets. 226.5 point total is mildly appealing. One of the healthier mid-range totals on this board. And you get options from the Nets like Cam Thomas, like Dennis Schroeder, who's been killing it. On the Bulls side, Levine is questionable, which could create a ton of value situations if he doesn't play. Otherwise, if he plays, it's essentially, they look like the Bulls. Kings and the Hawks, 236.5, leading the slate. Lot of upside in that one. 6.5 point spread. Hawks still a little bit banged up. Still some good value squares in their rotation. On the Kings side, just usual upside pieces, but those guys usually look pretty good and sim out pretty well. We usually get to a lot of Sabonis in this kind of a situation. Lakers and the Raptors, another game, 9-point spread is not ideal. Raptors pretty bad. Lakers at least decent. 232.5 point total, though, is kind of juicy, and there's obviously star power in that game on the Lakers side. Maybe some pieces and parts from the Raps. Pacers and the Pellies. Got burnt by the Pacers the last time around. Don't love going back to the well on their guard situation unless we get a little bit of clarity. Maybe we look at some of the big men. On the Pelicans side, they're missing a bunch of pieces again. Herb Jones and McCollum out again and for an extended period. So as mentioned, one of the guys that spiked for some ownership upside was Jose Alvarado, who's coming off a really strong game, played a ton of minutes. Got him projected right back for a big minutes total, but if he's getting a lot of ownership, I'm curious to see how he comes through the sim. But that's another appealing one with that game total. Denver, obvious upside in terms of the big star at the top. Same thing with Minnesota. And then you get reasonable pieces on both sides to work with, down through at least the top 3-4 players on both teams. Both teams run pretty tight rotations so far this year, 219.5 point total. There is solid defensive acumen on the Minnesota side, potentially keeping that down a little bit as far as the game total goes, but getting to any of the upside pieces, or even if any of the value guys shine through, we typically see a ton of Naz Reid with mid-20s minutes when he comes up. So we'll peel that game back and see what comes up from it. And then OKC and Portland to close it out. Looks like another ugly one, an 11-point spread. These last couple games, by the way, not on the DraftKings slate. They're only on the FanDuel slate. Should have mentioned that. 7 games on DK, 9 games on FanDuel today. 221.5 point total there. OKC favored by 11 and should just completely destroy Portland. Maybe some value guys end up shining through in the Sims, but doesn't look like an appealing spot on the Portland side. And then OKC probably just a little bit limited by the lack of competition, the lack of being pushed. I could see a lot of the key guys hitting the pine in the fourth quarter. They already play a deep rotation anyway, so we'll see what comes up. There's obvious scoring upside for a couple of those guys, but maybe not the best closeout game. But I think you will want one or two pieces in a lot of lineups, at least so that you've got some pivotability at the end of the night. Meanwhile, the sim is done. I'm waiting for the dashboard to populate to give me the results. It's going to be really annoying if this doesn't work. Mama says, if you listen, you easily min cash with Roger's lock I gave in chat. That works. Yeah, thank you, pal. If you weren't here attending these shows, I wouldn't be here doing these shows. So right back at you. 2 TD Rogers prop was plus 550. Yards parlay with that was plus 2,300. Nice. Norm Powell, I don't want to talk about. I'm mad at Norm Powell today. It was like a G, that 3. But what are you going to do? Come on, results. Let's see if I just click the results. Go over to here. Come on. The DK one didn't want to. Didn't populate the results for me. All right. I'm going to rerun DK one more time, and I'm just going to do it one time through instead of the usual 5 times through. And we'll just work with that. It's not going to be a major impact. Sometimes with the larger fields, with pulling the data together when you run it 150,000 times, sometimes pulling the data together something can happen. We'll rerun that. Lineups loaded. Generating lineups. All right, we're rolling. In the meantime, we could talk about FanDuel a little bit. Joker, what are you doing? There's all sorts of noises coming from the other room. AD looking like a fairly big piece, but below the field. He went up into, I think, the 40s on the most recent cut of ownership. Owned right around 40% in our sim. Definitely one of the big pay-up options on the FanDuel slate, it looks like. Really the highest owned pay-up option by a pretty clear margin. Alvarado came up like a monster. $4,400 value piece. He's coming off of 36 FanDuel points in 35 minutes the other day. We got him 74% of the time. That's ahead of the field. Again, he went up to big ownership when this sim ran. Cornette, big value piece, makes a ton of sense to me. Got him with a lot of minutes at 3,900. He's going to come up like crazy, especially on the single center site. Why don't we actually take advantage of this time? And that sim's rolling along. Since it's only one, it won't be long. But what are those last two games? It's Nuggets and T-Wolves, OKC, and Portland. Out of the games that are only on FanDuel, no love for Jokic, no love for SGA. Those are both players, as we talked about yesterday with Wemby and with some of the other superstar caliber players. And by the way, what a game by Wemby. Second player all time to record multiple 5 by 5 with 25 points. It's him and Olajuwon. Olajuwon did it 4 times. He's done it twice, I guess, now. And then as far as 5 by 5s in general, multiple games, it's only him, Olajuwon, and Karolinko. Wild. Monster game out of him. He was in my lineup. Oh, it seems to be running a second field anyway. Did I not read? I know what I did. This is me screwing this up, by the way. This is not... it resets when I clicked over to add the lineups. I forgot that the count reset. Let me do this one more time. That one probably will go through with the 5 sims, but it's not going to be quick enough. So anyway, continuing on with FanDuel. So with these superstar caliber guys, you can always load up a few shares of those guys and take extra shares of those guys. They came up basically even with the field. Doesn't look like the field's getting there all that much. Probably onesie-twosie kind of ownership on them anyway. There's monster per minute upside, 165, 169 per minute for both of those players. They're just 11-7 and 11-3. They're probably getting boxed out for value at their positions. At the upside, Anthony Simons. A minute ago, I said maybe we're getting some scraps from Portland, and it looks like we're getting a big scrap from Portland. Simons, 33% of our top 150. 5+ value score. He's only been a 0.86 per minute player. It's not really on reduced usage this year, though. 26.9% from 20 down from 27.6. It's not a monster hit. It's a matter of a couple shots in just a couple of games. But he's a solid 34, 35 minute a night guy. 36.3 the other night. He put up 35.4 FanDuel points. For the money he comes up, I think that's just more of a solid mid-range option. It's not like he's a super strong value buy. But he gives you enough with a little bit of ceiling upside, because if he goes back to the full, 1+ point a minute version, then you can get a little bit. My fear there is Oklahoma's a phenomenal defensive team. So I don't love throwing mediocre players into the OKC grinder, but he is coming through the sim a little bit. So something to watch there. I've got him 35 minutes, so that's below. I think it was more in the low 0.9 range. I could pull it up in the other file real quick, but I'm keeping an eye on the Ace Mind sim here. Anthony Edwards, definitely a nice piece to see. Landing in the late games. Gives us some flex with having a big salary player, and honestly, having a big salary player and having a $6,600 guy. That means if a crazy short value opens up, you could maybe pivot into shares of the bigger options down here. Maybe not quite, well, it's close because those guys are in the 11s. That tends to work better when the guys are in the tens. It's offset by like 1,000. But if something really significant opened up, you'd have some pivotability. I ran into that yesterday when who the hell was it at the end of the night? Somebody moved into the Phoenix rotation at the end of the night. I forget who it was. And I had like nowhere. I had the slot where I could put him in, but then the value couldn't buy me anything. I had Harden, I had Zubac in a variety of lineups, and they were the top two most expensive guys left. So it didn't matter that value opened up and that I was aware of it. If anything, it would have just downgraded a lineup without being able to make any changes. So it's nice when you've got a couple of an expensive guy and a mid-range guy there with some swappability. Christian Brown hits that board a little bit, 5,400 on FanDuel. We get 7.3% of DeAndre Ayton as a center only. But again, some of that is probably being chewed up by the Cornet value. Otherwise, we're just getting odds and ends of guys like Devo, Jamal Murray, a little bit of Jalen Williams in there, Kamara at 3%. Nobody really super relevant the rest of the way. But these guys definitely, again, you can hit the gas pedal a little bit on those guys. Doesn't look like we got any Nas as a mid-range value at 54. He typically needs to step into more minutes when he's priced like that. Danny didn't really come up. Otherwise, nothing. And good news, gang, we finally have a completed DraftKings sim. Let me just pop it in here, and away we'll go. That's the lineups download. There we go. At long last. Took us a second. Now's when I drop that in there, and then I jump back into chat, and you guys are shouting at me that like 4 different things have changed, like Karl Anthony Towns is out, and all that sim is irrelevant anyway, right? Ryan Dunn, thank you, Ken. Yep, that was the guy. Wasn't that the guy from Jackass that died? Pretty sure that was that guy's name. I mean, obviously not this guy, but I'm pretty sure that was his name. Mama says, at the end of the show, can you just recap your top 5 by position? Yeah, I was actually going to do that. I was going to just put a little tab like I did with the Vegas tab and grab like the top 5 for each site and do it like a, if you're here in a hurry, these are the top 5 guys. Didn't get a chance to do that with rerunning the Sims, but we'll talk about it. I dropped that in there, didn't I? Right. Oh, I've got it sorted to the games that are only on FanDuel. I'm like, why the fuck is that not populating? This is what happens when you try and do too much. All right, so we got to sort our positionally by FanDuel. Actually, do you guys want to do it that way since we already talked about these guys anyway? I'll just sort by DK and we'll jump down. I think that makes the most sense. So starting with guards, as usual. And we might, again, have to make up some FanDuel guys along the way. I'm just seeing that those are formatted with arrows for some reason now. This has been a frustrating show to start as far as this data goes, but we can talk about the guys all the way at the top of the board while that figures itself out. Jose Alvarado, again, on DraftKings, looking like a fairly significant piece. Not as big as on FanDuel. His 46 point guard only doesn't play quite as well on the DraftKings slate. I'm looking, is there competitive value? You also have $4,600 Ben Simmons over there chewing up some point guard shares. He landed in 18%. Looks like we're a little above the field on the Alvarado play and a little bit below the field on the Simmons play, which I'm perfectly content with. They're basically the same in a per minute sense, 0.86, 0.87. I've got Alvarado projected for 8 additional minutes. Simmons' 14.6% usage is no different than Alvarado's 14.3. There it goes, cleared up. Probably have to do that again when we change positions, but that's okay. So between the two, I'm kind of happy that this is the guy that came up higher. He's chalky for sure, but we got a little bit more than the field of him. Definitely, again, not as significantly as we did on FanDuel, where that value just plays like crazy. That plus the Cornet value right now looks really strong. If something from the Knicks like Jericho Sims opens up, he'll probably swap in with Cornet to create even more value. Between the two, Cornette's the better player and probably going to give you a better ceiling, but I think he's like 1,000 more. We'll get to that when we get to center. But on FanDuel, Alvarado is looking like one of the key values of the day to me right now. Cam Thomas, a much more significant piece on DraftKings for 72 with multi-position eligibility versus 79. He's shooting guard, point guard on FanDuel. He's shooting guard, small forward. So I suspect that having that different eligibility sliding him into a lot more shares, and he's definitely a little bit cheaper against the relative cap. So 37.3% and above the field for a 1.12 per minute player this year. That's up from 1.01 on the FanDuel scale last year. He's a 1.07 FanDuel this year. So call it 1.06 DraftKings. One of these days I'll just drop last year's number. There's only so much real estate on this dashboard, but usually I don't have it that far. Give you guys a little better view. I think that's a little better. But yeah, Cam Thomas, obviously pretty scoring dependent player. He does have a 13.7% assist rate, which is not nothing this season. But we know that Cam's big games come when Cam goes nuts and makes a ton of shots and racks up a ton of real life points. Austin Reeves, a solid mid-range play on both sites. 61 on DraftKings, point guard, shooting guard. 69 small forward shooting guard on FanDuel, so some position differential with him as well, and the price offset across sites. 18% level with the field on FanDuel. He's a sub-5 value play. So is Cam Thomas over there. So are Halliburton and Schroeder. You get to a couple of fives down here where we get a little bit more ownership on the FanDuel side. All those guys, solid 5+ values on the DK slate. So a lot of maneuverability between these guards on a deep slate here. Reeves came up 35% of the time, basically level with the field. He's been a 1.0 per minute player on DraftKings, 0.96 on FanDuel. Roughly the same usage as he had last year. Last time out, 27.8 minutes, 9.9 FanDuel points. Obviously a big downside game. You'll get that from time to time. If he misses a few shots as a moderate usage player, an average usage player, you can come up with clunker games like that. He's a shooter. He's making 44.8% of his 5.8 threes right now, averaging 16.8 a game. Good player. Again, solid mid-range guy that we got to in chunks on both sites and basically level with the field on both. Tyrese really didn't come up on FanDuel. At just 8,600, it's not a spot where I would say you're necessarily doing something wrong by taking a few shares of him. On 2%, 2 percentage points less usage this season, though, he's been way down in fantasy points per minute. 1.0 versus 1.38 last year. I don't think something has radically changed about his game that he's not going to get back to around this level as time goes on. We're talking about 5 games. There's a lot of happenstance in that size sample. So you can fire away with a few additional shares, and since we're basically level with the field, it means the field's probably a single-digit-ish ownership in the ownership that this sim ran against. Juicing up a few additional shares against the field to gain a leverage position on a topside player like that, no problem with it. 26% on DraftKings, you're already getting there. It's essentially level with the field. I'd probably want to stay around that level, especially with him kind of underperforming. 43.8% true shooting is a big part of that so far. Making 25% of his 8.8 threes a game, big part of that so far. Schroeder's been performing like a great option. He's overperforming last year by 0.2 of a fantasy point, 1.10 this year versus 0.9 last year. On DraftKings, he's been a 1.18 per minute player, which is significant. 6,800 both guard positions on DK, 6,900 point guard only on FanDuel. Little bit more of them on DraftKings. 19% level with the field. FanDuel, 12% level with the field. That's probably around where I'd have him. Since everybody's, the secret's out. That it was never really a secret. Everybody's been getting to him basically since the beginning of the year. But I think he's just a guy I'm happy to click in right around where the field's at right now. Succeeded with him. He was in that lineup last night, right? I threatened to show that lineup, and then I never did. No, it's CP3 that I was thinking of. Chris Paul had a solid game yesterday. Oh, you're right. That's the lineup. So, had a solid run at the end with Harden, Book, and Zubac in there. If you were here yesterday, we talked a ton about Zubac. It was one of the top overall values of the day. We talked about what was going on with Memphis, and we called out Jay Wells specifically. We talked a little bit about Jake LaRavia. Stephon Castle came up as a value guy and didn't quite get there for us. He was a low-owned guy. That's why he snuck into this lineup. Booker I talked about really liking at the very end of the show. I caught that he was kind of low-owned. So I kind of got into that play, and I made sure that I had at least one share. I think I had 2 shares of him across my 7 lineups that I entered in this thing. Harden I was all over. He was a big play for me yesterday. Chris Paul, again, just kind of crept into that lineup. But if you remember yesterday, I was saying at the beginning of the show, like, maybe we got to something from San Antonio. Maybe Chris Paul gets there on some upside and a cheap price. And he ended up being in like 30% of our sim during the show that day, or yesterday. Wemby and Sohan were also in that lineup. So a little bit of a Spurs stack. Actually, Castle as well. That's a 4-man Spurs stack. I didn't even realize that. That's wild. But Wemby, obviously, with that monster, was a big, big piece at 26% on FanDuel. That's pretty solid if you can book that. But was almost better. Again, Norm Powell, if it didn't. A little bit of bad luck at the end of the night there. Jeremy Savage had CP3 and Wemby still lost. Lillard killed him. Yeah, I mean, hey, Lillard's a superstar. I never will fault anybody for going to Dame Lillard, but you're going to get those downside games. Continuing down the board a little bit here. So we mentioned Ben Simmons again. He is coming up a little bit on DK. 0.87 per minute so far this season. That's down 0.83 on FanDuel, down from 1.11. It's never a guy I'm really looking to roster. He's coming up a little bit on FanDuel as well, 20% over there, and he's above the field. So he's going to land in some sims. He's got point guard and power forward eligibility, so that's helping him out a little bit on the FanDuel slate. 5,100 over there versus 46. In a small set of lineups, I have really not that much love for Ben Simmons. If I'm building 20, he's probably in a couple of them. If I'm building 150, he probably gets into, maybe I undercut where that position is and just take him with the field and get like 15%. But there is an idea of a little bit of return to an upside game, the 1+ per minute player. Trey in that shorthanded Atlanta situation has been a beast. 30.9% usage up from 28.92 last year. 1.27 up to 1.36 per minute so far on FanDuel. 1.43 per minute on DraftKings. Trey's terrific. Trey is playing like a star, like the star that he is. I shouldn't say playing like a star and imply that he's not. 10-2 though, we're up there in salary a little bit. 10,000 on FanDuel, but he's paying it off. 10% ownership, basically level with the field on FanDuel. 16% on DraftKings, basically level with the field. Couple additional shares, either plus or minus, no problem. If you want to take a specific position rather than going in basically even, I think that's a good spot to do it on because Trey comes with a decent amount of ceiling. He also can come with a little bit of downside. But in 40.4 minutes the other day, 65.3 FanDuel points, that'll get the job done. Brunson, just 15% owned on FanDuel, 8,400, not a bad price for a 31.4% usage guy that we know that's going to be out there for a good chunk of minutes. The production's been down a little bit so far, 1.03 per minute on FanDuel versus 1.24 last year. On DraftKings, that amounts to 1.08. But we know this is a definite upside player who's going to have every opportunity to just do whatever he wants on the court. So I like the upside for him. If there's no cat, that just feeds additional, shots to everybody, but Brunson's going to get his either way. 14.6% and a little bit below the field on DK. Same thing with Cade in the same game on the other side. He's putting up a decent value score for essentially the same price. If you're doubling up those point guards, it's probably going to come up in some sims. 12.6% of Cade and below the field on him, though, on DK. And similar on FanDuel, too. 10.6% basically level with the field. Jaylen Brown, never a problem firing up an additional few shares. That's the kind of position I would take here. He came up 19%, basically right around the field. If you want to take that to 25, 30%, have just a few additional pieces, that's a good play in my mind. 122 so far this year on 32.5% usage, up from 28.3% usage. He just kind of shares the 1-1A with Tatum on a lot of other teams, a lot of worse teams. He's a star. So if you can load up additional shares of Jalen at moderate ownership with a little bit of upside against a Charlotte team that is going to do nothing to stop him, that works. It's going to be the same thing with Tatum. 11.3% of Jalen on the DK slate. Shooting guard and small forward eligible on both sites. 8,500, reasonable price. Gets him to a 5 value score. Level with the field. It's exactly the same on DK. Jalen Suggs, we're offset from the field. This is probably our biggest overall undercut on the entire slate right now. I think the ownership that it ran against, he was a little bit juiced up because I think they've got him projected for several more minutes than I do. He's been averaging 27. He played 35-2 in their last game, so I split the difference around 31. Put up 45-7 on the FanDuel scale in that last game. It's been a 1.31 per minute player on 24.5% usage. There's a lot of upside here. But it is a situation where, it's kind of like what I said about OKC with Simons before. Throwing him into that Cleveland defense with a shorthanded Orlando team, I don't love it. And the way he's bouncing off the field right now at price, 6,800 on FanDuel, 58 on DraftKings. We got him a little bit more, basically twice the ownership on the DK slate as compared to FanDuel, but again, significantly below where the field is on him. That's an interesting pivot point for the entire slate. That could be a key inflection point. If he goes off and we're under, that's gonna be a big hit. But I can kind of endorse getting under. If you want to grab a little bit more, take it out to 15. I'm sure 15 is still well below the field. The field's probably off in the 30s somewhere. So that looks like our biggest undercut guy right now. Io looks like an interesting value square. Not at a ton of ownership. At 51 on FanDuel, we didn't really get him. Level with the field in the low single digits. We're in single digits on DraftKings as well. Looks like the field's probably in the 10 range. He's 45. I've got him projected at 28 minutes, which is a little bit above his average with Levine ailing with a shoulder issue. I think that kind of makes some sense. And if Levine doesn't go, I think Io spikes a few additional minutes that would really take him into the upper echelon here. So at 4,500 point guard and shooting guard, he's definitely one to watch and keep an eye on that Levine status. If he spikes a few additional points in his projection, know that you can grab a few shares of him as we head toward lock. Mikal Bridges just 8.6% on DraftKings. The per minute production's down a little bit for several Knicks. 0.86 per minute so far this year on both sites, 0.94 last year. Usage is down a little bit for Mikal. He's 19.2% usage versus 23.8 when he was a more featured piece. But he's one of the best corner three shooters in the league. That's exactly where they want him. They have set opportunities for him there. And he's a guy who just creates fantasy points as well. So he's never a guy I mind getting to in lineups. I think he's an underappreciated asset a lot of times. Definite upside for several of these Knicks. Again, if Towns doesn't go, several of these guys get into the 40-minute range probably. Mikal, OG, primary among them. Hart, we'll see. Still a little bit banged up. Brunson probably plays a few additional. Those aren't direct positional pivots, obviously. The key guys that open up there are the big men that we'll talk about in a bit. But I do think it creates opportunity for a guy like Bridges to play into the 40-minute range with Tibbs. This is the part where we're kind of hunting for outlier pieces from FanDuel across because everybody here on DraftKings is in single digits. Not that 8% aren't relevant over here, but everybody came up a little bit below the field in declining shares as we go down the board. Herter, 8% below the field, 7% of De'Aaron Fox, who, again, another upside player. If you want to squeeze a few additional shares of De'Aaron Fox against Atlanta where there should be plenty of run or plenty of back and forth action, whatever you want to say. He's obviously getting plenty of run. He averages 36 minutes. That's right where we've got him. 34 FanDuel points in 30.9 minutes the other day. Always going to give you a 1+ per minute upside. He was a 126 player last year. 108 on the FanDuel scale this year. 112 on DraftKings. But upside for more. Like I said before in the run-up, everybody from Sacramento is going to look at least okay at the upper end of their salary board. LaVine, if he goes, he's a reasonable piece on FanDuel, 12%, basically level with the field. A lot less on DraftKings at 7,300. It's a different price fit slightly. He's more expensive, direct comparison on FanDuel, but against the FanDuel cap, it's a little lighter. So we got a little bit more of him over there, but not really a key piece. And again, banged up. Don't love players with shoulder injuries. So we'll see what happens there. Kobe White could also benefit if no LaVine. He's already coming up at 20% on FanDuel, 6,500 both guard spots. Solid 22.6% usage, basically direct compared to last year's usage at 22.4. He's given us 0.99 per minute versus 0.90 last year. Came up at a 5% rate as a 1.03 player on DraftKings. Could be a little bit of upside there. And again, that Bulls backcourt is definitely one to watch as far as LaVine's status goes. Jordan Hawkins got pretty popular on the short slate the other day as a value play, 11% today in that shortened rotation for New Orleans with a couple of key missing pieces. Got him up at 34 minutes. He's only 5,100. He's putting up 0.76 per minute. This is our first super low output kind of key guy. I think you can get away with it, but I don't love that he's over 5. FanDuel's being a little bit realistic about the minutes that he's going to get with that price. So he's not like a run off and go make sure that you have it kind of a value play. He's just okay. On DraftKings, 5% at 5,200. Again, just okay over there. Derek White doesn't really look like a piece. Few odds and end shares is who he is, kind of a spot. Giddey is another piece of Chicago that could get interesting. He's already coming up at 28.6% on FanDuel, which is pretty significant across both guard spots, and would definitely have a little bit of additional upside if LaVine doesn't play. 21.9% usage so far this year, 22.3% last year. He's a 1.20 player on FanDuel, 1.14 last year. On DraftKings, he's been at 1.27, but he's not a great fit. 6,900 at point guard only. He only came up for under 5% of the time and below the field over there. I think you would gain ground in our sim and level off with the field if we get a no LaVine situation and we just juice him a little bit. But you got to watch for that. Keep an eye on that projection as well. Nembhard, I don't even want to talk about that last game again. Completely burnt me. 5 minutes. Was off to a decent start in those 5 minutes. We'll see if he plays. I forgot to read off all the questionables and stuff. He's questionable today. Our questionables for the day: Brandon Miller, Karl Anthony Towns, Goga, LaVine, Jalen Smith, Patrick Williams, Andrew Nembhard, Miles Turner, Jordan Hawkins himself, who I talked about a minute ago without mentioning that, Yves Missy, and Daniel Theis. Out: Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford. We've already mentioned Horford. DeQuan Jeffries, Mark Williams, Mitch Robinson, Precious Achiuwa, Azure Thompson, Paolo Banchero, big one that we talked about for Orlando already. Craig Porter Jr. is doubtful. Max Strus, JT Thor, Lonzo Ball, Bojan Bogdanovic, Day'Ron Sharp, Jared Vanderbilt, Christian Wood, Scotty Barnes. Scotty Barnes is a big one for Toronto. Bruce Brown, Kelly O. Emmanuel Quickley is doubtful. He's a big one for Toronto as well. Devin Carter, Orlando Robinson, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Dyson Daniels, DeAndre Hunter, Vic Krejci, Cody Zeller, Herb Jones, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, DeJounte Murray, Isaiah Hartenstein, Jalen with a YLIN Williams, Kenrich Williams, Shaden Sharp, Matisse Thybulle, and Robert Williams are all out. Franz Wagner is available. He was probable earlier in the day. Trendon Watford, same thing. Anthony Davis still probable. D'Angelo Russell confirmed available. Vlatko Konkar and Aaron Gordon both probable. Sorry for leaving that rundown out earlier as we were scrambling for the Sims. That could have killed a minute. So Nembhard, potentially one to watch. Even if he goes, potentially limited. He's dealing with a muscle strain. And they were building up his minutes back up anyway. So they might just be a little bit cautious. Ben Mathurin played really well the other day in his absence. Mathurin's down here. 27 minutes didn't really come up much on either site. But if we goose his minutes a little bit in the absence of Nembhard, probably would land as at least a mid-range type play. Ingram, sub 10%, level with the field on FanDuel. A little bit of upside there with some missing pieces around him. It's 1.20 DraftKings, 1.15 FanDuel so far on 27% usage. Essentially looks exactly like who he is so far this season, and sims out like who he is right now. But it could be an upside day for basically anybody from New Orleans with those missing parts. Pritchard, no real love. 2% FanDuel, 4% DraftKings around the field. Ivy, 4%, 3%. Nobody else really coming up. LaMelo at 5%. He's not hitting the board. 135 this year, 137 last year. One of the funnier Halloween viral videos, if you saw that yesterday. I think it was from yesterday. I don't think it was an old one, but it was going around yesterday. He's walking, presumably, from the locker room to the steps and like up to the practice floor or whatever, and they had like a scary clown thing set up. He screamed like a woman and slapped the clown and ran up the stairs. It's pretty funny. Alvarado, I think more of a lock than Pritchard Mamba. Willing to be wrong. But Pritchard I didn't get a ton of. I know I just said his name a minute ago. There he is. He's fine. I just think it's kind of a Peyton Pritchard day. He could see additional upside beyond the 25 minutes. I mean, he played 38.6 the other day, put up 28.8 FanDuel points. But he's kind of priced for that. At 49 at 5,000 across sites, mid to high 20s fantasy points, not necessarily paying the bills when there are stronger value plays on the board. He's capable of more than that. He's a 0.92 per minute player on FanDuel, 1.0 on DraftKings. So if you're getting 1.0 and he plays 38 minutes again, well then, yeah, that's a monster upside play. Only on DK. Yeah, again, I have few issues with it. He came up a little bit more for us on DraftKings, but again, at 5,000, I don't know that he's the best value positionally. You're getting a lot more from some of these guys. But yeah, across a lot of lineups, you certainly want to have some. And that's a spot that you could goose the field because, you know, in addition to missing pieces, there's also the monster blowout upside for a guy like that. Could just play additional minutes down the stretch. No worries, bud. Other than that, that rounded out the guard position. Let's jump to forwards. We've chewed up a lot of time on this show already. These things fly by. You guys have no idea. Let me clean that up again. Actually, you know what? Just so we don't have to do it a third time. Yeah, it's this column. Oh, that time it just did it. The other time it took like a minute. I will never understand why Excel sometimes works really well and sometimes likes to take its time. Like, look at this sort. That sort just took longer than it should have. But when it sits there for like 2 minutes just on like, all I did was type a 1, I really question. Josh Hart, top of the board. Somebody was just mentioning him. Mamba likes Josh Hart's rebound prop. He's going to hammer that rebound prop. I like that. 16.7% rebounding rate so far this season. 64.4% true shooting. Pulling down 10 plus a game. Needs to make more of those threes. He's only taking 4.5 a game, but he's only making 27.8 of them. That's where a little bit of his scoring-based upside goes. But love Josh Hart for just being a very, very good collector of fantasy points who plays an absolute ton of minutes. 42-2 the last time out. He put up 38.8 FanDuel points. That's typically good enough from the mid-range to at least, you know, he's not going to burn you with that score. You're happy to have it if you get it. The usage has been up for him so far this year. He's put up 0.95 per minute compared to the 0.83 per minute that he put up for the full season last year. 0.98 on DraftKings. We got him nearly 40% of the time. That's essentially level with where the field was. I think that's about where I'd be. I don't know that that's one where I'd, you know, run off and grab a few additional shares. Since we're shaded green, maybe we're, you know, 38 versus, you know, 32, somewhere around there. That's enough margin probably on a guy like Hart. 26% and essentially level with the field on FanDuel, also fine over there. Cam Thomas, we discussed here in the guard position, again, comes up minimally on FanDuel, a little over 5% level with the field. A couple additional shares just on the scoring-based upside is okay, but know that he's a super scoring-dependent player. On DraftKings, we got him a lot. RJ, I feel like I bad-mouthed RJ accidentally the other day. It was his, second game back? Had a pretty good game. 50.8 FanDuel points in 33.3 minutes. Very solid upside game. He's put up 1.28 per minute in his 2 games back. He's a 1.02 per minute player last year, but they are shorthanded. Lot of key guys missing. So I might have breezed past that the other day, and I probably shouldn't have. So if you missed the RJ Barrett play the other day, it might be on me. 30.7% usage in those 2 games so far. Going to be the focal point again. He's coming back to essentially no ownership in our sim on FanDuel. He does have some public ownership. That's a decent-sized undercut on the FanDuel slate. But you can see at 7,900, even with a solid projection on him, he doesn't even crack the 5 mark as far as our value score goes. On DraftKings, he's a 5 and change, 32% owned. That's basically level with the field. It's probably about where I'd want to be on him. I do expect, even with the additional usage, we're probably not getting 1.34. I mean, we might today, but not in a sustained sense. But RJ is a good player. The other day, I think the way I put it was that the ceiling games are few and far between, and then he went out and had ceiling-ish. He's a good player. He's not a great player, but I do like RJ. So I wanted to make sure that I addressed him properly for the DK folks out there today, because he is coming up quite a bit at 32% in the sim. Ricochet looks pretty decent on both sites. 32% of them on DraftKings, 4,500 over there as a small forward who's going to get a ton of minutes again. That Atlanta team being shorthanded is benefiting guys like him, benefiting guys like Roddy, who's 2 spots further down or 3 spots further down. Jalen Johnson, even further down at a higher price, different kind of play. Got a ton of him as well. So just having that abundance of minutes and opportunity for Atlanta at a variety of prices thrusts a ton of those guys into relevance. Nearly 47% of them on the FanDuel slate and well above the field at 4,800 small forward. I love just locking a mid-range value guy with a lot of upside into that small forward spot. 33.2 FanDuel points in 34.8 minutes the other day. If you can give me around 1.0 at that price, I'm perfectly fine with it. For the season, he's been 0.79, 0.76 over on DK, but a lot of upside for the top pick. LeBron at just 89 is always at least going to catch the eye. 88 on DraftKings. We got him 23%, but a little bit below the field on the FanDuel slate. 31, basically level with the field on DraftKings. He hasn't been the monster upside player, really, in terms of the overall rate this season. 114 is down significantly from 138. Usage has been reduced by about 3 percentage points. But it is still LeBron. There is still limitless ceiling on any given slate. And as his price comes down to match the output, I don't mind grabbing a few additional shares. If you want to take it, say the field's at like 30 FanDuel, and you wanted to take it up to the field, kind of level off, I think that's fine. If you wanted to go a little bit more aggressive on DK, we're basically level with the field. Call it 30%. And you wanted to go to 35. 40 might be pushing it. 38. Keep it under 40 probably. But grab a few additional shares. There's upside. There's ceiling on LeBron any given slate. We did not get any Rui. I think that's the first time I've run a sim this season where Rui hasn't come up. We got a ton of them on DraftKings. Differently priced. 5,300 DK at both forward spots. 6,100 FanDuel both forward spots. That's a hit even against the different caps. 28.6% of them on the DK slate. We did come up below the field, though. Field's probably in the mid-30s range there. Roddy, we also got a little bit below the field, but he does look like a key value. Very cheap. 5.93 is the highest value score that we have at the forward spot. Ricochet right behind him at 5.87. And we got to more Ricochet because he's probably a little bit lower owned, or basically they're the same. And Roddy was, 42. Why would that be a little bit lower? It's probably ownership that thrust Ricochet into more. Or maybe a little bit of a higher standard deviation. And a higher projection. On FanDuel, we got Roddy at 26%. Level-ish with the field. That's probably a couple points below. Field was probably 28-30 in that. So we do want a chunk of them. 4,300 over here. 4,200 over there. He's been delivering solid value. A point per minute at that price. 1.01 on DraftKings. He's played 3 games. He's played 23.6 minutes a night so far. But in 31.8 the other day, he put up 25.3. That's not exactly a point per minute. But the point per minute output so far for the season in the 3 games combined tells me there's a little bit more juice there. He's just a value square. He's not a superstar. He's not going to win you. Well, he might win you the tournament with his value. But he's not a guy who's going to run out and score you 60 fantasy points. But a solid 30 out of that price, I will take that. Here's Mr. Isaac, Jonathan Isaac. 4,300, both forward spots on FanDuel. He is a 1+ per minute player in basically all situations for the last number of seasons. He's played 2 games this year. He's played 12 and a half minutes a game. They're extremely short-handed with no Paolo now. Like I said, I lowered him right before the show. I had him at 22 minutes. And I didn't love how aggressively he was coming up. He's still coming up pretty aggressively. 18% is below the field on FanDuel, but they reduced their ownership number when that last sim ran. I am happy with him around this level, 15, 18, maybe even 20% if things creep back up a little bit. I really don't believe in a massive upside Isaac Day, though. He's cheap, and he is a point per minute guy, point per minute plus. 116 on just 16% usage last year. So far in his 2 games this season, in the minimal minutes, it's been at 1.31, but that's a matter of 2 shots going in the tiny sample. A little bit more usage, but again, it's a matter of 2 games where he took maybe 1 or 2 additional shots. I don't love the Isaac play, especially if the field starts getting back to more of it. Again, the ownership came down during the day, but if it goes back up, or if it just stays a little bit aggressive against where he's coming up, I'm happy to take this further down. On DraftKings, he's a little bit harder to do that with because he's only 36 over there. Power forward and center eligibility is a little different. You can see the different impact of the value score, 519 versus 579. We got him 20% of the time. That is light against the field. It's not aggressively light. It's not a straight down red arrow. But we did come up with less of them than the field. He's a 1.25 per minute this year. Call it 1.18, 1.20, somewhere around there, DraftKings last year. There's definite upside. And if he creeps his way into mid-20s minutes, that's where he becomes problematic. I just don't know exactly what it's going to look like. LeBronto still sick, maybe. Mormons to Mo. If LeBron's still sick, well, again, we didn't really get a ton of them. We got some. I'll let other people. It's a spot where my continuing philosophy was something like that for speculative spots is let the field go their way on the speculation, and I'll keep the consistent line on just who the player is, and that'll lead to opportunities more often than not. Sometimes it can hurt you if LeBron actually is out there with pneumonia or whatever. Then yeah, it probably hampers his upside. But if he's healthy and people went away from him for that reason, then you get upside from it. So I tend to stick with the who the guy is on that kind of a situation. Cam Johnson hit the board a little bit, 34 minutes projected. He's a fair value at 5,700, both forward spots on the FanDuel slate, 55 on DraftKings, 20% DK level with the field, half that level with the field on FanDuel. Is who he is kind of spot for Cam Johnson. Pascal Siakam, 76, another guy who, essentially is who he is. Similar usage year over year. Similar output, 115, 117 FanDuel, 121 per minute on DraftKings. We got him 19% of the time on DK, essentially half that level with the field on both sites. This entire group of guys is essentially the same. Franz, with a minutes uptick, is kind of interesting. 18.67% of them level-ish with the field on FanDuel. 14.6% level-ish with the field on DK. 1-2-3 so far on the DraftKings scoring system. 1.21 per minute so far this season on FanDuel. That is up on the same usage, essentially. 25% usage last year, 25.7 this year. We're up nearly 0.2 of a fantasy point per minute. Plenty to do with no Paolo. I just, again, don't love throwing him into that Cleveland front court. So I think that's where maybe a little bit of hesitation comes from. Could easily have goosed him a little bit more, either via minutes or projection. But I'm comfy where we're at. I think this is about right. But you definitely want to have some. It's a mid-range play. Jalen we talked about, or Jalen Brown we talked about. Jalen Johnson I only mentioned quickly. We only got 9% of them, and we're below the field, gently below the field on DraftKings. He is a decent value piece over there. Everybody, again, from Atlanta is benefiting, and he's a prime piece for them. 1.09 per minute on 22.3% usage this year. That's up from 18.4. He put up 53.4 FanDuel points in 40 minutes the other day, playing 37 a night over their first 5. We really didn't get that much of him over here at 84 in the forward spot. At the same price with both forward spots on FanDuel, he's in nearly half of the top 150, or he isn't half of the top 150. That's above the field, but that's a nice upside piece. If I can grab that and other people aren't, I'd rather have that, and with all the values that are on the board on a deep slate, I'll take my value squares elsewhere. And I can take that big piece from Atlanta as a big leverage spot against the field. It's a good player, 1.09. He was, again, 1.07 last year on average usage. More to do. Herter, we've talked about. McHale, we've talked about. Tatum came up at 6% and 8%, exactly like I said with Jalen. You can goose either one of those guys. What you probably don't want to do is nudge both of those guys at the same time. So do one, run a set of lineups. Do the other, run a set of lineups. If that's your thing, if you want to get to more of either Tatum or Brown, or just have like more of them represented in the sim, I think that's perfectly fine to do. Tatum's been a 1.48 per minute player on FanDuel this year, 1.51 on DraftKings. He's an absolute stud. As far as the upside players per minute go, he's probably the best value among those guys with the as far as the absolute true ceiling guys. 5.14 on the value scale on DK, 4.90 on FanDuel. Levine, we've talked about. Monitor the status, especially for its impact on the down rotation guys. Zion, 16% of them on FanDuel, 6% on DK. Below the field on both sites. Not really, he's never going to be my favorite guy to talk about. I'm not a big fan of the player. But he does produce decent output, 1.22 on FanDuel this year. It's down from 1.27, and he's actually done that so far this season on 5 additional percentage points of usage, 28.5 up to 33.9. One would expect that would put him into the 1.3 and change range as time goes on if he stays at that level. So, with the usage uptick, it's tempting to say that we could hit a little bit more Zion. But until I really see the output spike, I'm kind of hesitant. 43.9% true shooting so far this year. Averaging 18 points, 8.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists. Are you guys big Zion fans out there? Am I the only one who's not totally wild about him? I can see the ceiling day. Clear as day, I can see the ceiling score. I'm not saying he's missing it. If anything, I'm saying it's kind of hidden here in that uptick in usage. I just don't really feel comfortable at those prices saying that he's a priority. If he was like, let's say he was 82 on either site, I think I'd be more excited about it. I don't know that he fits well today. Maybe a shorter slate. Yeah, Andy doesn't really like him. Jeremy's playing Ingram, no Zion. I do like Ingram. He's a few spots further down the board here. We got him 9% of the time on FanDuel, 4% of the time on DraftKings, so a little bit lighter than Zion. Between the two, he is my favored play more often than not. Zion has outperformed him so far this season, though, on a per-minute basis as well as on the usage. He had more usage last year. He's got more usage this year. Ingram's only crept up small increment. 1.15 per minute up from 1.13 last year. He is at least paying off his slightly higher usage. He's a better price fit, 7,800 versus 83 on DraftKings. We did get to him a little bit less, but as far as the value score goes, FanDuel 4.98 is lower than Zion. Zion is 5+. We did get him 16% of the time, right? So I'm glad that at least it's represented by the math, because I don't feel comfortable selling the player. So we did get him 16%. That's an undercut to the field fairly aggressively. It's probably mid-20s field ownership. But you do want to have some. That's the nicest I'm going to talk about him. DeRozan, not really a piece on either site. Mid-single digits on both. Perfectly fine, but a limited ceiling player more often than not. Every now and then he breaks off a big game. But I never sweat not having DeRozan. No love for Mobley on FanDuel, just a little bit, and below the field on DK. Javonte Green at 9%, another value piece from New Orleans at just 4,100, 4,200 over here. Probably picks up additional couple of minutes if Hawkins doesn't go, is questionable. Jonathan Magbo, 4,200, 26 minutes on FanDuel, plays up pretty well. 16% ownership on FanDuel. We've seen him pay that off a couple times. He's been a 1.24 per minute player so far this year on just 17% usage. As long as he stays cheap when he hits the board for a few minutes, he's going to be somewhat interesting. Just 4% of them on DraftKings at 45, though. Didn't really hit over there. No real outliers. 4% of Tobias, 2% of OG. This is one, again, if no cat, I'm probably going to just out of the gate give OG a couple extra minutes. And probably same thing with Mikal Bridges and just push them up in the more toward 40-minute range because I think that's very realistic. And then the direct beneficiaries will be in the next screen when we pull up centers. But OG's one to monitor. We got him 2% over here, 2% over there. He's a fair enough value square. 5.32 on DraftKings, 5+ already on FanDuel, and if we give him a little bit more, he's underperformed his talent. He's a 0.81 player last year. This year so far just 0.60. The usage has been down a little bit, but he's a guy who can also just wreak havoc defensively, create a bunch of fantasy points on any given slate, and if he's got more to do, he becomes more appealing. Nobody else is relevant here. Let's jump to center. If you guys get a chance, click the like button down there. Solid handful of people hanging out. Looks like 20 people jumped when we hit about 5 o'clock, I think, jumping over to the other guys, but I get that. But if you're still here, hit the like, hit the subscribe so you know when the football show goes live tomorrow. I'm going to try and do it as early in the day as I can, but as I can is a very relative term for me. So we'll see what that looks like. But the football main slate show is going to be tomorrow. Going to get basketball updated. If you're not familiar with the site, rotoscouts.com. It's the last time I'm going to plug for the show today. rotoscouts.com. All these basketball projections. Football main slate, projections, rankings for every position, ownership, not ownership, the groups and stacks and game notes article, which I put about 12 hours between today and Sunday morning. I put about 12 hours and about 20,000 words into that thing as far as breaking down every single team. It's a lot of what we'll talk about on the show tomorrow. That'll be up on the site. NHL projections up on the site. All three of those sports, all-in prices under $1 a day, weekly, monthly, or quarterly plans. The key choice there, how often do you want to kick in? It's $6 and change a week. So if you sign up, let's say you don't even sign up today. Let's say you say, let's see how I'll eyeball that guy's projections. We'll see how they do tonight in basketball. Did pretty well last night in basketball. You monitor it today, you monitor it tomorrow, you decide you're going to jump in on Sunday. You sign up 10 a.m. on a weekly on Sunday for $6 and change, $6 and I think 20 something cents. You're going to have this week of football. You're going to have next week of football. It'll cut you off somewhere around, whenever you sign up next week, but you'll have it. Basketball main slate every single day in the interim. Hockey main slate every single day in the interim. If baseball was still going on, you would have had that too. Under $1 a day. Trying to put as much bang for your buck in there. While I'm plugging, 10 people went away. That's what people think of talking about. Anything that brings anything in. You guys rock. Love all of you guys who have subscribed so far. Check it out at RotoScouts. Also check out our guys at acemind.io. Links are down in the description of the video here. Let me start talking about centers before everybody else runs away. Luke Cornett looking like a strong value on both sides. 3,900 FanDuel, 50% above the field. 3,400 on DraftKings, 76% above the field. You can easily cut those numbers down and stay ahead of the field. So far this year, 0.82 per minute on just 8.5% usage. He could still go out there and put up a total clunker of a game. But in 15-7 the other day, put up 21-8. No Al Horford today. He's the next man up. So presumptive, significant upside. He's easily the highest value score on both sides. 7+ you don't see all that often on DraftKings. So definitely an interesting player for Cornett. But there's a lot of spots to spread some shares around. So if you pull this down, judging by that, he was probably in the upper 40s maybe. If you pull that down to 50, 60, you're fine. Same thing on FanDuel. You can reduce a little bit. You're just biting into your margin if that value play does connect. Jakob Poeltl, a guy we've gotten to a fair amount of the time so far this year, 6,900, 27% owned on FanDuel in our top 150. Same thing on DraftKings. More level with the field on DK. He's slightly higher value score on FanDuel, so it looks like he's a little bit more popular over there. We got him at 27%, slightly less than the field. He's probably mid-30s there. But a 111 per minute so far this year, FanDuel, 112 DraftKings. That's slightly down on slightly more usage. There's upside into the 120 and change range any given night. Isaac, we've talked about already. He does have center eligibility, which helps him out even further on DraftKings. Again, if he goes into the mid-20s for minutes, look out if you don't have him. I suspect we're dealing with about 20, maybe even 18 minutes, though. That's my gut. Has not played a lot yet this season. Doesn't really juice up minutes in the, even when he's healthy. Typically a low mid-20s player at best. So the idea of putting him upper mid-20s just because they're shorthanded, to me, doesn't really make sense. Domantas Sabonis, I mentioned him before, and I'm happy to see him. We always get to Sabonis. 26%. We're a little bit above the field on FanDuel. Still under 10K. Always a triple-double threat. 17% level with the field at 96 on DraftKings, where you can grab 2 of these centers. I didn't do our center-only exercise on FanDuel. Let me grab that real quick. Obviously, there's 77% right there. Another little bit there. Another little bit there. That's about it. So 87% among the center-only guys on FanDuel, which just informs us that, by and large, our power forward center eligible guys are going into power forward spots as you're building those out. Anthony Davis is a big piece in either spot, 39.3%. Most of the center spots that didn't go to the center-only guys probably went directly to AD, but we did get him a little bit less than the field. He was, I think, the highest owned guy in the ownership that went into this sim at 11,000. They had him really juiced up. I don't think he goes off at that high ownership, which would just make him look more appealing. If we can be around 30, 35, upper 30s, mid 30s on AD in our top 150 and have him own, more in the high 20s by the field, that would be ideal. Just 8% of them on DraftKings under the field over there as well. Looks like he's a little bit popular at his 10-6. It's a little bit of a price offset. He's center only over there, but it matters less. Miles Turner still questionable, didn't go in the other one. Isaiah Jackson benefits typically when he doesn't go. He was the direct beneficiary last time out. I think his price got juiced up a little bit on both sites. Where are you, Ike? There he is. Yeah, 52 FanDuel, 45 DK. He didn't really move up that much. If Turner doesn't go and we see a big minute spike for Isaiah Jackson, we'd have some of them here, but we'd have probably more of them over here. It would be interesting, though, because he's center only, how it would work against that 3,400 and that 3,600. That would be one to watch in that situation if Miles Turner doesn't play. Mobley, nothing on FanDuel, just a mix and match kind of a share on DraftKings. He's got power forward on the DK, actually power forward and center on both sides. Magbo is another value guy that you could book into center shares. Probably fits better power forward or forward on DK. Vooch, not really coming up that much. Cat, not really coming up that much. Coming off the monster game. 60.6 FanDuel points in 38.8 minutes the other night. But again, questionable to play. If he doesn't go, there's a major downstream impact that we need to talk about. And that is with this guy and that guy, who are currently like bottom of the board. 0.62 per minute from Sims. 0.78 per minute so far from McPorty. Sims is the more established player, the guy that I would expect. It's close because they really like what they got out of Porty in the preseason. Tibbs seems to like him. He's a big-bodied kid, a true center. I would suspect that Sims gets the start, but I think the minutes maybe come close to leveling off. If I had to split it, I'd go like 26-22 in Sims' favor. But both those guys are 3,600 on FanDuel. More to the point, both those guys are 3,000 on DraftKings. So at the dead min price, either guy jumping into minutes or both guys jumping into minutes, both guys will hit the value board pretty hard. And then whichever way the minutes split will be the favored guy. The field will be on both of those guys, though, if that happens. Know that you're just getting a chalky value square, but it's one of those just build it in and buy things with the money that it saves you value square because it would be so appealing at the dead min. It's not about the talent at that level. It's about the 3,000 price tag at the position and booking the minutes. Even if they fail, it's the right decision. They're the dead min price, and one or both of them would step into 20 minutes, 20 and change minutes. Jared Allen didn't land on FanDuel. Most of these guys didn't land on FanDuel. A little bit pieces and parts, but a lot of guys falling by the wayside. Jalen Duren, Wendell Carter, Clint Capella, Namasketa, mid-range minutes. He could see a few additional minutes depending on how that game flow goes. Depending on what Cornette's doing out there. Keta could benefit from a few additional minutes, and he's very cheap. But he doesn't really math out, even at a 4.87 value score at 3,200. If you put him at like 20 minutes, he would. But I'm not really seeing that. 8.4 so far per game in his 4 games. Nick Richards, another guy coming off a monster performance, 60 and change FanDuel points in 33 minutes the other day. Just, even with the diminished front court for Boston, probably going to be challenged to repeat that performance against Boston. Okongwu didn't really land. 0% of all these guys across sites. Grant Williams. Ike Jackson, again, would if the situation changes. Nobody overly relevant down this way. Tillman, 14 minutes, 37. The same thing. Could benefit from a few additional front court minutes for Boston. Outside of that, I don't see any crazy outliers. I would be happy to have a few shares of Cat at these prices, at 83, at 81, if he plays. I'm fine with taking a few shares, especially since the field's not really going there anyway. There's obvious upside. Let's take a quick look at some Ace Mine lineups. Took all that time running those sims. Might as well look at what the results were, huh? I mean, we've been looking at the percentage results all along. But let's look at what the actual lineups look like. Curious to see how the optimized lineups performed in the sim, because I ran the optos with the higher Isaac projection. So we might see a little bit of additional Isaac shares. We'll see. What do I need to do here? Where'd you guys go? There you are. So Sims, as always, courtesy of our guys over at acemind.io. Promo code RotoScouts, 20% off your first month over there. Ha! Got another plug-in. DraftKings. So we've been talking about these results in terms of the percentage exposures all along. This is just to, kind of get a feel for the shape of these lineups. Ricochet, key piece of value. Number of value pieces from that Atlanta team. LeBron creeping into that top lineup. How about that? I don't totally love that top one, if I'm being honest. But it does have upside pieces. Just two underperforming guys. One guy who performed well in one of his 2 games this year. Solid value square here. Solid player right there at a good mid-range. Reeves was another decent mid-range guy. I don't remember talking about Jamal Cain at all. And Jalen Duren wasn't really coming up that much. That's like the one. Jalen Duren came up at 0.67% in our top 150. So that top lineup is literally like the one that he's in out of the top 150. That's wild. Luke Cornett ate up a bunch of those shares along the way. Jonathan Isaac got into a couple. He's also landing in the forward spots quite a bit. Expected that. Good amount of Pirtle in here, getting into the util spots. So double center looks pretty viable in a bunch of these top-end lineups. You got a Cornett AD there with Zion. Alvarado value, Isaac value, Tatum. My nemesis Nemhard right now. Solid name to have as my nemesis. I like it. And then Anthony Black, who we also didn't really touch on as a value square. Where'd Black go? I have Black projected at 26 minutes. He's only 4,200 on the DraftKings slate. We only got it. That's also the only share we have of him in the top 150. He's not all that popular. We're a few points below the field at our 0.67, but he's low single digits owned by the field. So just a couple outliers getting through with those types. That third one down is kind of interesting. The Ben Simmons, who, much as I'm not a fan of the player, he was mathing out pretty well. Simmons, McHale, RJ, Mobley, Cornett, Alvarado, LeBron, and Tyrese. That's a solid balanced lineup. There's not a bad option in any of those spots. All right? Every single one of those players is at least a good NBA player. And a guy like Cornett obviously has the minutes boost today. Alvarado has a potentially large chunk of minutes again. Everybody else in their usual role. I like that third lineup. I think I like it better than the top two. it looks like overall, at least at the top end as it stands right now, and again, we have potential emergent values out the ass today, so this could change very, very dramatically. Bear that in mind as you go to build lineups. But it looks like right now this is favoring balanced kind of constructions with around like 2 value squares and then taking solid upper mid-range types like this third lineup. A lot of these look kind of similarly constructed to that. A lot of Cornet. Yeah, looks like a lot of this, as the percentages obviously told us, a lot of it rotating around Cornet as a value and Alvarado as a value. And then seemingly balanced. There's a Roddy, but that one doesn't have Alvarado. So same thing. Fox, Herter, Roddy, LeBron, Cornet, Tyrese, RJ, and Cam Johnson. That's a super balanced lineup, taking the value with Cornet and Roddy. So again, right now, this looks like the approach is 2 value squares and probably 2 upper mid-range guys like a LeBron, like a Zion, like a Tyrese. Some ADs are certainly getting there, though. Jalen Brunson's getting here. Cam Thomas is obviously a big piece on here. He's a very solid mid-range guy, a Trae Young type, De'Aaron Fox type. So book a few of those guys and then fill out with the $5,000 and $6,000 players across the rest of the lineup. And that looks like the vast majority of these DK lineups. But again, we get one of those $3,000 guys opens up. Cat doesn't play. This entire thing changes, and it's almost certainly going star scrubs. And we'll probably get 1 or 2 of those value pieces. Just scrolling down here gradually so you guys can get some inspiration. Feel free to rewind and freeze frame. I don't encourage you to use these lineups, mostly because I'm not allowed to. Don't want to stand in violation of anybody's rules. You can see a little bit of a mix between the optos and the generated ones in this. I was kind of expecting that because of the change with Isaac. He came up less in the generated lineups versus the optimized lineups. So it's a mix. Typically, it's going to favor the optimized, but our top couple performers were out of the optimizer, and that third one was actually a generated one. Grab some FanDuel real quick. These are also pretty balanced looking lineups. I like the number of good players that we're getting in a lot of these spots. Fox, Alvarado, Levine, if he plays, perfectly fine. Jalen, Ricochet, LeBron, Randall, Cornet. No issues there. Randall wasn't a big piece. Or wait, was he? That was on that FanDuel only slate. If you missed it, we talked about that slate at the very beginning of the show, those last 2 games that are only on FanDuel. Randall was only coming up like 1% on FanDuel. The biggest pieces as it stood at 6,600, Anthony Simons. But I talked about not really loving throwing him into the OKC defense. It's just he's got plenty to do, so he could get there anyway. Anthony Edwards, who I like a lot, 18.6% owned, level with the field. Would be happy to grab a few additional shares, take him up to 25% or so. High upside player at the end of the night. He was the biggest piece. Otherwise, though, 8 and 7%. Devo 6%. Devo's always got upside. He's also cheap. Between him and like Simons, it's totally offset by like 10 fantasy points as far as the projection goes, by 8 minutes as far as minutes go, and we got Simons way, way more. But a low-owned DiVincenzo, if he's hitting those threes, he provides quick upside at 4,700. So he's somebody to at least keep in mind as a building block late. Not a priority piece. Again, only 7% of them, 6.7%. Jokic and SGA we did not get in the sim, but those are 2 guys who would open up significantly if there's value. So what you want to do is make sure that you've got at least a couple flexible spots with salary in 2 directions so that you can book a value guy in and go up to a Jokic, go up to an SGA if those end of the night value squares open up. So something to keep in mind there. As far as the rest of these FanDuel builds go, a lot of commonality. I love seeing the Tatum shares up at the top end. Some Jaylen Brown getting up to the top end. So again, both those players, either guy, even though they only come up like single digits, upper single digits in the Sims, either guy is a very big upside guy who is going to help you to the top of the results in the lineups that they succeed in. Therefore, either guy is a guy that you can grab a few additional shares of against the field. LeBron works that same way. A lot of Sabonis coming up. I like that a lot. Good amount of Cornet. A lot of Jakob Poeltl. Very straightforward level builds, though, or balanced builds. It's like spend mid-range point guard. Spend mid-range. It's basically spend and a mid-range, or like upper mid-range, lower mid-range guy at every spot. So what we don't have a ton of is those top end salary guys. We're getting more of the 9s, the 10s, rather than getting all the way into the 11s. Still a lot of moving parts, though. Again, a lot of this is bound to change. Some Roddy value, some Ricochet value, key value pieces for the FanDuel slate. More to work with on FanDuel with the 2 bonus games. Longer night, but more to work with. With that in mind, guys, I think I'm going to punch out. A lot to do. Got to get everything updated. Keep up over the next hour and a half. We'll keep up with all the updates. I'll put an update in right away after the show ends. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate all the likes and the subscribes. Hit that bell if you haven't already so that you know when the football show goes live tomorrow. After that, just mute notifications. Tell your family, tell your friends to come subscribe and mute notifications so we can get up to 1,000 subscribers. Want to get that done before the new year? Otherwise, you guys absolutely rock, especially those of you who are purchasing subscriptions. Slightly more favorite in my heart right now. They're so affordable, though. If you want to grab a little piece of my heart, just go grab a subscription. It's very easy. Rotoscouts.com, guys. Check it out. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. We'll see you tomorrow.